Hello, and welcome to Auto Be Careful, the place for car safety news and information. I'm Gene, and today we're going to talk about the first multi vehicle pileup crash test and what it means for safety in these extreme circumstances. PBS aired a two-part documentary on May 7th and May 18th in which they follow a group of researchers as they prepare for and run the first of its kind multi-vehicle pileup crash test. The full documentary is available on the Nova PBS YouTube channel, so if you're interested in a deeper look at this experiment, I would highly encourage you to check it out. The documentary does an excellent job of showing what it takes to get this new and very complicated type of experiment set up and run. Let's start by talking about why this test was being done. As I mentioned in my previous video on crash test dummies, vehicle crash tests have been around for decades. The vast majority of these crash tests have been single vehicle crashes or multi vehicle single impact crashes in a very controlled environment. There are very few, if any, tests that evaluate how a vehicle fares in a multi collision situation or evaluate how a driver's behavior would impact the results. This test aims to change that, and it has a few other benefits as well. There were three main goals for this test: look at how different types of vehicles would perform in a multi vehicle high speed collision, analyze how different drivers would react in this situation, and evaluate how accurate crash forensics actually is. To take a look at how different vehicle types would perform in this situation, they used 8 vehicles of varying types, including trucks, vans, sports cars, and hybrids. To analyze how different drivers would react in this situation, they had 4 unsuspecting drivers as well as 4 engineers that knew what was going to happen controlling the 8 vehicles. And to evaluate how accurate crash forensics actually is, they brought in a forensics team to evaluate the aftermath of the collision without knowing what had happened and compared that to the actual results. This video is going to focus on the results of the test. The full special goes into much more detail, including how they created an immersive driving experience while keeping the driver safe, how they simulated an icy road without using ice, and how they collected such a large amount of data in such a short amount of time. If you're interested in those details, I highly recommend you go check out the full special. First, let's take a look at how different vehicles performed during the test. There were some mixed results, with some vehicles containing occupants that would have survived, some containing occupants that would not have survived, and some containing a mix of both. While the results were heavily dependent on each driver's driving style, there were some interesting outcomes that tested the limits of safety systems. One of the more interesting was how multiple collisions to a single vehicle demonstrated the limitations of airbag systems. Since airbags are designed to inflate quickly and then deflate quickly, they're really only helpful for a single collision. One of these vehicles had 3 separate collisions. In the first collision, the front airbags deployed. In the second collision, the front airbags had already deflated and the side impact airbags deployed. In the third and probably most severe collision, all the airbags had deflated and there were no airbags left to deploy, so there was nothing between the occupant and the metal structure of the vehicle. This clearly shows that there's more work to be done to protect vehicle occupants in multi collision situations. One of the other vehicles showed that there may be room for improvement in crumple zone technology. This vehicle was a hybrid and successfully protected the battery pack from damage, but ended up caving in on the occupant compartment. This could have caused injuries to occupants that were near the compartment's collapse. Finally, one of the other vehicles showed the limitations of side impact crumple zones. Unlike the front and rear of a vehicle, which have a lot of room to compress, the sides of a vehicle do not, and this can be a problem in collisions. In all, there were several areas of concern confirmed by this test. Now let's talk about how driving styles impacted the results. Unsurprisingly, the more cautious drivers tended to fare better than those that took more risks. While all the vehicles ended up colliding with something, the most cautious drivers were able to minimize damage to both their vehicle and the occupants inside. That pretty much lines up with what was expected. Finally, let's discuss the forensic results. These were really impressive. After the collision occurred, a forensic team that had not witnessed the collision and was not given any information about what happened was asked to piece together the events that occurred using only the aftermath of the crash. With one exception, the team was able to accurately determine what events had occurred and when they occurred in relation to each other. The only mistake they made was theorizing that one of the parked vehicles was actually one that was being driven. This is probably a pretty easy mistake to make considering that that particular vehicle had been moved as a result of the collision, so it's pretty impressive that this was their only mistake. It's worth mentioning that this pileup was pretty spread out and not all of the vehicles ended up colliding with each other. So it'd be interesting to conduct this trial again with a more traditional looking pileup and see how they perform. Overall, it's worth noting that because there are so many uncontrollable variables, it's unlikely someone could conduct this same experiment and get the exact same collisions. This is one downside of this type of crash testing that doesn't exist in a laboratory with extremely controlled environments. Although it should be possible to rerun this test and get the same general results and draw the same general conclusions, and I'll be interested to see the results of another attempt. Importantly, this experiment can serve as a map or blueprint for future crash tests of a similar nature, which will make experiments of this type much easier. So that's a look at the first of its kind multi vehicle pileup crash test and the results that were uncovered from the test. It'll be cool to see where this research goes in the future and how it'll make our cars and roads safer. As always, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something, and remember to like and subscribe.